Welcome to Let's Connect Greater Portland, a show about the changes and challenges we face and the great things that people are doing to make Greater Portland a fantastic place to be.
My name is Andrew Zaro, filling in for Christina Egan. On today's show, we will be exploring the recent significant $25 million investment in the Portland Harbor Dredging Project, a project that has been considered critical to the future of Portland's working waterfront. Joining us today, we have three people who have been deeply involved in this project. We have Dan Healy, who is the chair of the Board of Harbor Commissioners for Portland Harbor. Having been appointed by the Portland City Council, Dan has been commissioner for about 14 years. He has been working to promote the dredging project during all his terms on the commission, beginning with the first underwater EPA brownfield grant. The Harbor Commission holds the permit for the dredging of the piers, marinas, municipal piers, and landings. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you.
Next, we have Bill Needleman. Bill is the Portland Waterfront Coordinator for the City of Portland. For over 10 years, Bill has been the project lead for the City of Portland Harbor Dredge and CAD Cell project, working on pre-project planning, continuing through multiple funding rounds, consultant selection, disposal planning, property owner outreach, and government and community relations. Welcome, Bill. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have Tom Dobbins. Tom was the chair of the Harbor Commission in 2013 when the commission applied for a brownfield assessment grant to study the dredge material along the private and public piers in the Portland Harbor. They received a $350,000 grant at the time to find the level of historical contamination and a safe and environmentally sound method of disposal for the material. He's no longer on the commission, but has stayed an active member of the Portland Harbor Committee. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for joining us, and welcome to the show. This one's particularly interesting to me. I was fortunate enough to work on this for the past couple of years in my former role as a Portland councilor. But we're going to dive in today. 30 minutes will go by very quickly as we're talking about this important project. Just a reminder that we're going to try to take time for questions at the end. If you would like to ask a question to our guests, just give us a call at 780-4909. That's 780-4909. So let's get started. The Portland Harbor is the last deepwater waterfront in Maine, and the accumulation of silt, pollution, and sand has impacted the ability to use the harbor as we need it. It's resulted in externalized impacts on parts of Maine's economy and environmental impact and more. From my understanding, the project has two main components, dredging and disposal. So let's start with the obvious question. Why dredge? What does the dredging process involve? Bill, I'll look at you for that one.
Thank you, Andrew. All harbors are defined by the relationship between boats, land, and the piers and infrastructures that connect marine commerce and marine activity to landside commerce activity and transportation. All of that requires an adequate water depth alongside those infrastructures, and without that adequate depth, harbors cease to function. So virtually all urban harbors dredge at some point during either their construction or their ongoing maintenance. So what we're trying to do in Portland Harbor is absolutely normal and necessary as part of our maintenance of Maine's largest port.
Well, connecting the marine commerce activity to land use, and one thing that just really stood out is without this depth, harbor ceases to function. That's really powerful. Tell me a little bit more about how did we get here? What started? So maybe why did the Harbor Commission apply for this brownfield assessment grant? Tom.
Thank you. Back in 2010, the commission was approached by one of the environmental firms in Portland to look at some of the dredging. The fellow who brought it to us, his wife was one of the pilots, one of the sea pilots in Portland, who was very active in the upkeep of the Portland Harbor. So we applied for a grant, and in 2014 we received an assessment grant, which allowed us to go into all the piers. We worked with the pier owners, went to all the piers, public and private, took samples, estimated what was the contamination levels. This material is not Superfund site, this is just material that can't go to sea. And we also had to come up with the sensible way to dispose of it, being environmentally sound and economically viable. And that's where the project went. And then Bill came on board right after we got the grant, and that started the Portland Harbor. I think we had a long name at the beginning of it, but we've kind of shortened it up to the Portland Harbor Dredge Committee.
Well, that's probably helpful. We tend to have alphabet soup when it comes to some of this our organization's names. And thank you for telling us a little bit about how we got here, and the Harbor Commission being one of the early participant stakeholders. Dan, can you tell me a little bit more about what is the role of the Harbor Commission? Who are they? What do they do?
Yeah, I should be happy to. We're established in 1917 by special law of the state legislature, and our responsibility is navigation and safety and commerce in the Portland Harbor. So the harbor consists of Portland and South Portland. So you needed one organization that could function with two cities and multiple islands that fall under the city. So that Harbor Commission's role is anything that gets permitted or needs to be permitted, whether it's dredging or you're building on a pier or you want to extend a pier or you want to do repairs, goes through the Harbor Commission. And our mission is to ensure that it stays an active port. And, with this loss filling in of the piers, we've really lost about 30% of the use of the piers, which is a major economic loss for the city, or definitely a loss of opportunity for the city if we don't use 30% of the piers we have. And it's much cheaper to dig more than it is to build more. And that's what's kept us involved for this period of time. And we're just one small part of it. The city, the state, in both cities, the environmental groups where this is a cleanup have been totally involved. We've had the support of the fishery industries. Longshoremen, there is nobody that's really opposed to the project. And everybody has stayed enthusiastic, optimistic, and hardworking through this whole period. And to get to this point is a pretty exciting time for the project.
There are very few times that I've observed, and I think many of us have in the last few years, where there is such a unanimous amount of collaborative stakeholder engagement and support. And I think this project is a pretty wonderful example. You mentioned the collaboration between the city, the state, the federal government, environmental groups, the union, longshoremen, fishermen. That's remarkable, and I think it's something to celebrate. It also reiterates the significant need for this investment. You said 30% of the piers are not currently able to be used.
Correct, yeah, because close to the shore is all filled in, so you don't have enough depth to bring your vessels in.
Wow.
So it's definitely a problem, and it's not clean dirt. So this is an environmental as well as an economic project, and there's winners all around through this.
Can you, I want to get a little bit more into what the process looks like, but just because you brought up it's not clean dirt, can you tell me a little bit about how does that silt and that I'm going to say, for lack of a better word, pollution, how does it get there?
A lot of it's sediment that's washed off the roads and through the cities. And as you know, the city's spending a ton of money right now for combined sewer outflow to prevent that in the future, and that's going to help it. The sediment that washes down through the rivers, the Fore River and the Presumpscot River in particular, all flow into Casco Bay. So you bring in sediment into the harbor. And then when your vessels are in the piers and the props are running, they're kicking up that same soil. And the soil is not, sediment is not clean enough to be dumped out in the ocean disposal site, which means it has to go upland, it has to get on a train, go out west to be treated. And that cost a lot of money, and that stopped a lot of the pier owners even from investigating how dirty it is. Yeah. They'd be forced to do it. So money-wise, the individual private owners weren't able to do the work, and then this has provided a means to do it, and And I'm sure Bill will talk about the CAD cell a bit and its purpose, because that's the key is to, okay, what do we do with the sediment when we take it out?
I'd like to add just
Yeah.
a little bit what Dan said. A lot of the sediment is historical. I mean, Portland is an old port, and a lot of these facilities hadn't been dredged for many, many years. And now the new regulations require you to do extensive testing for anything going to sea. So it's very hard for a private pier owner to invest close to $100,000 in testing to find out he now has to go upland to a $200 to $300 disposal site. So this is another reason why the assessment grant came into fold, to see how bad the material was and then what to dispose of and how to dispose of it.
And furthering the importance of the private-public partnership here.
Correct.
Dan, you've queued me up perfectly. Bill, I would love to go back to you and learn a little bit more about the dredging process, and then talk to me about the CAD cell method. Can you elaborate a bit more on the confined aquatic disposal cell method, and why was it chosen for this project?
Thank you. The disposal of contaminated material has been the barrier for, as Dan said, even investigating, but certainly pursuing the dredging of most piers and wharves and marinas in Portland Harbor. And the mechanism that other harbors elsewhere have employed is that confined aquatic disposal cell, a CAD cell. It's essentially a hole. It's a deep hole excavated in a safe part of the harbor, where it is removed from wave action and strong currents, so that material that is put back into the hole stays put. So clean material is removed from the CAD cell location, and that's brought to a licensed federal disposal site out in the ocean. And the dirty material is removed from the piers and wharves and marinas and then placed into the CAD cell. From a technological standpoint, these are excavators and clamshell dredges that are just picking up dirt and moving dirt. It's not rocket science. The engineering and the environmental science and the ecological review that goes into it, that's where we all need to rely on consultants and good science, strong data collection, and a really robust permitting system which protects the ecology of the bay, protects fisheries, and protects human health. So in the end, we end up with a much cleaner harbor and more usable piers and wharves. But the technology itself, it's excavators on barges.
Wow. I know you say it's not rocket science, but just trying to conceptualize that project sounds huge. I mean, that's a significant endeavor.
It's a logistical nightmare, quite frankly. We've got 32 property owners, 2 municipalities, state government, federal government, regional government in the form of the Harbor Commission, public and private, and then the interested parties, which include the fisheries and the environmental groups. And so bringing everybody together around this project, that's why it's taken as long as it has. And it's actually been a barrier to funding. Most funding agencies want simple, and they want easy. We're not simple, we're not easy. It happens to be necessary, so we continue to work with partners, build collaborations, and it appears to be paying off.
Yeah, well, it appears so. Well, I want to take a moment just to, we're going to take a short break. Wow, time certainly is flying. You're listening to Let's Connect Greater Portland, a show about the issues we face in Greater Portland and the movers and shakers leading the way. I'm Andrew Zarro, filling in for Christina Egan. Today we're talking about the Portland Harbor Dredging Project with Bill Needleman, Tom Dobbins, and Dan Healy. So we've talked a bit about how we got here, why we need to do this, and the process of disposal. I'm hearing some common themes, the overlap of the economic impact, the environmental impacts, and the community impact. Let's talk a little bit in the, we've seen more and more significant impact of storms in this part of the world. In the last couple of weeks, we've had a couple of 50-year storms, only a couple of days apart from each other. How does that impact our harbor and subsequently this project? Whoever wants to take that. Bill, go ahead.
So the storms are important to recognize at this time when we've just seen historic levels of wave action and tide height and even different storm directions and wind directions that have been stressing the harbor. All that requires a great deal of repair and maintenance and the wear and tear on piers and wharves. None of that is possible without consistent revenue streams. So bringing the piers back into good repair so that they are fully leasable allows the owners to make financial investments in the resiliency of those infrastructures moving forward. If they can't lease the berthing, they are going to have a harder time leasing the top of the pier, the buildings on the pier, because the fundamental reason why a pier is there is to serve the berth. Once the berth loses its revenue potential, the entire financial system of the pier starts to erode. The other thing about storms is that they are going to make this problem more difficult moving forward because storms create erosion, there's downstream supply of sediment from rainstorms, and that increases the need for dredging moving forward, which is why we need to remove the polluted material now so that we have fewer barriers to dredging in the future. We have done good work to clean up our street systems, our sewer systems, and the practices around construction so that newer material has shown to be cleaner than those legacy pollutants that we have in the sediment from the past.
And yeah, I mean, just to see the increase in frequency, just talking about the additional sediment and runoff that's happening, even with our significant investments in the stormwater wastewater separation, it feels a bit overwhelming almost. I would be curious to know a little bit more. We've touched on it lightly, the community involvement. Bill, you talked a little bit about, the economic impact of being able to lease out those spaces, but can you talk a little bit about how local businesses and the community have been involved in planning this project and maybe some funding components where appropriate? Tom, how about you?
Yeah, right from the beginning, we brought the pier owners, the cities right involved in the very beginning of the project to get them on board. That was the beginning of it was very hard to go knocking on the doors of each one of these owners. A lot of these piers are not singly owned. There's pieces of segments in it that are owned by different entities. To get them all together was a little bit of a feat to begin with. But once we did they realized that we were real and we were trying to move forward with it, and the assessment grant showed that, which then brought those people even farther along the process. So we were very smart at the very beginning, and Bill was the one who really got us to make sure we brought in all the players, being not only the financial people in the beginning of it and the people who had a financial stake, but the environmental stake, as well as fishermen, to get this project moved along. One thing I did want to just bring up, this is for the smaller public and private piers, not the big industrial piers. They've been taking care of themselves for many years, and it shows that once dredging like this will be completed, maintenance dredging becomes a much easier and economically feasible process.
That is a very helpful distinction, that it's for the smaller private public piers, not the industrial. What does that look like? Obviously moving forward, it sounds like it would be easier once this heavy lift is done, but what does that look like for the next, when's the next dredge going to be?
Very different from pier to pier. Okay. This is, harbors are located in places that are safe, so they're sheltered from storms, but they have enough water to bring the boat up alongside. Moving forward, we envision that there will be dredging in the future because the sedimentation is going to continue, but it really depends on where you are. If you're closer to Commercial Street and the calmer water, those are the safest berths, they're the most valuable berths. But that's also where sedimentation happens most rapidly because it's calmest. The water is energized by a storm and it goes into the calm part of the harbor and drops its sediment. But that's exactly where the lobster boats and the tour boats and everybody wants to be, in those calmest parts of the harbor. And so you really are stuck between a rock and a hard place, because that's where your tenants want to be, and that's where you're safest. But it's also where you have to conduct the most maintenance. It's also where the maintenance hasn't happened in recent history. And many of those places that used to accommodate large ocean-going vessels are now mudflats at low tide.
Wow.
There's literally no activity that can happen in the best part of the harbor for safe berthing.
Well, you're going to fix that, it sounds like. Go ahead.
Yeah, timing wise, the federal channel that comes in the harbor is dredged to 35 feet, and this tries to be done every 10 years. So when you look at the piers, they probably don't need it that often. But when it comes time to dredge again, they're going to have clean dirt, and they'll be able to dispose it at the federal site in the ocean, which makes it a whole lot easier. And through this whole project, when you try to look at your funding side of it, it's not like you're putting up a beautiful building and you're asking somebody to donate to the building. This, you're digging a hole in the water that nobody's going to see. And it's going to look nicer when it's done, for tourists. They won't see all the silt and extra dirt at the edge of the bulkheads. They'll be looking at nice, clean water and a much nicer tourist attraction. So everybody, as I say, wins in the end. But to sell the project and then to keep the process going will be part of the educational process with the Harbor Commission.
Go ahead, Bill.
In Portland, time and time again, we've reaffirmed the fact that we support a working waterfront. And that term, working waterfront, it's been meaningful to us. It's in our city policies. It's in the language that we use when we describe our own town and our own city. The dredging is going to be fundamental to keeping that. If we can't use these facilities for commercial marine enterprise, we don't have a working waterfront. That's what a working waterfront is. And so we'll have to make different land use choices moving forward if we can't maintain the facilities to continue to serve fisheries, to continue to serve marine transport, boat servicing, and the other marine industries that we're used to, but also new industries, whether it's offshore energy, whether it's aquaculture. There are emerging industries that are going to need access to the water, including just the repair of the waterfront itself, as we deal with sea level rise and upgrade facilities to be more resilient in the face of climate change. That in itself is going to take a robust working waterfront just to conduct that work.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up when you bring up sea rise, I know we don't have much time left, but as you're looking at future maintenance, obviously it won't be as heavy of a lift, it sounds like, because this really is going to be a game changer moving forward. But have you imagined what future maintenance would look like as we look at what Commercial Street 2050 might look like, as we look at the climate maps? And, you say land use might have to be re-envisioned, which it's very true that municipalities have. Land use is one of the most impactful tools municipalities have. In this case, we also have the luxury, or the honor rather, of marine use. But how do you envision future maintenance of this while balancing the reality that parts of the waterfront and Commercial Street will not look the same in 30 years?
Yep. Working waterfront uses are more resilient to flooding than alternative uses. Fishing, marine transport, marine construction, these are industries that are challenged by flooding and by storm events, but they are far more prepared to bounce back than retail, restaurant, office, those uses that don't need to be on the water. So reaffirming our commitment to working waterfronts is in itself a resilient strategy. And we will need those those marine industries in order to keep ourselves safe, in order to continue to rebuild and reinvest. And so as Commercial Street changes, there's always going to be a need for, an imperative for, commercial marine enterprise that will keep us safe, keep us employed, keep us fed, and keep us moving. Because the need for working waterfront uses and port activity won't go away, even though the infrastructure will need to change.
Wow, very impactful, and reiterating the importance of a healthy working waterfront. We're nearing the end of our time, so I'll give everyone just a moment for closing thoughts. What should folks know moving forward as we get ready to begin this project? Start with you, Tom.
Just support us, keep us supported. It will be not a long process. We hope to do it as compared to when we started. We hope to complete it probably in 4 to 5 years. Our window of opportunity to dredge is only between November 1st to April 1st. So we're just looking for support of the community to keep moving forward.
Bill?
Really want people to understand that this is governments at all level working together for the community. And so the federal government through EPA and through our permitting work with the Army Corps, the state government has been invaluable. MDOT and the governor's office working on funding issues, the Harbor Commission, and both Portland and South Portland collaborating on a scale that is really, almost unheard of.
And last but not least?
No, it's been a great project. It's well received. Now we're being in the execution stage. We'll get a lot more publicity. We've had the political support within the city and the state, and that would continue. As you know, Commercial Street used to be water, and maybe we'll come back to that, and the piers will be extended to the other side of Commercial Street. But at the same time, with the storm increases, all of the piers need to be tightened up a little bit taller than they are right now. And through the permitting process, that's been encouraged. And now that the piers will have more use, the pier owners will have a better ability to get financing to get it done.
Thank you so much, Bill Needleman, Tom Dobbins, Dan Healy. Thank you for being here and talking with us about such an important project. I want to thank our sound engineer, Anella at WMPG, who collaborates with Greater Portland Council of Governments in producing this show. You can reach us on Instagram at Let's Connect Radio. This was a story of a coalition building stakeholders, and a rising tide really does lift all ships in this case.